with a lot of things in life, my relationship with cannabis came full circle. So I'm going to be talking about this circle, and this idea of circles, this notion of circles really means a lot to me, speaks to me. Ever since Mac Miller, the late Mac Miller, made his posthumous album Circles, I've been toying with this idea. I've been seeing the effects of that. I even see spirals as very important. As spirals to me is a bigger concept, is a more just personal concept. But in this case, circles are, it's cathartic. It's good to know sometimes that things come full circle. It's good to see how life happens like this. And in this case, yes, cannabis for me did come all the way around. So you'll see how it did in this episode. I'm going to also talk about the pros and cons, well, my pros and cons from my experience, and then just my final takeaways. So stay tuned because this is a big episode and I really hope you take something away from this episode, some perspectives. Maybe you reflect on your own cannabis usage if you've ever tried weed before, okay? It's not that big of a deal anymore, okay? It has its stigmas before, but now it's just another thing. But it's all depending on how it works in your life. So listen to my story and see what that means to you. So thank you for being here. Let's just jump into it. By the way, I did get my hair done, so y'all see that, okay? I got this done just for you guys, just for this video. No, that's where you're wrong. Okay, my birthday is today as this video is released, as this podcast is released. So yes, thank you. Thanks, sis. Just wanted to go into the new year looking and feeling fresh. So this circle, right? Let's start with the circle idea because there's different levels to the circle, okay? I started out as a non-user, right? Never tried it. I started experimenting, which means, I was, trying it out. So I'll get into that, how that looked for me. And then I became a recreational user. So I'd use it from time to time, became a frequent user. So I'd actually use it like, let's say, every other day, a few times a week. And then it became to the highest point where I was just dependent on it. And that was like the height of my dependency. I wouldn't really call cannabis something you can get addicted to physically because if you stop for a few days, it only takes a few days for your body to recover. It's not really in the category of addictiveness, but anyways, dependencies can be quite severe from person to person. So that was the height for me of this circle, you could say. And then, I took a step back and I became, again, a frequent user. I took a few tolerance breaks. And I did my no sip, no smoke challenges. So I stopped a little bit and then I turned into a recreational kind of user. And then I went back to, how I am now, a non-user in a sense. So it is a full circle. And I want to explain kind of the timeline of this. So let's start with not as I'm 26. Let's start all the way back to when I was like 17, 18. And, that was kind of towards the end of high school. I did not smoke at any point in this, like around 17 or so. I was actually an athlete for a lot of my life. I was playing competitive soccer from about like 12 all the way till like 18. So I was playing soccer for a lot of years growing up on the Brampton Blast. I don't know if you guys know that team. I was playing on school teams. I was just focused on fitness. That was how I was raised, and my body just allowed me to do that easily. So even though I was around friends who, used cannabis, or as we called it back then, weed, because it was illegal. So I was around weed all the time. I was around it, and it wasn't a big deal. I was never peer pressured to do it. Like I have good friends. They would never be like, oh, do this, so you can't hang with us. No, I was around it. It was no big deal. I knew how I stood. My identity was athlete. So I never really questioned. I never really wanted to. Never saw a big interest in it. We'll come back to this idea of identity because that's really important. So just keep that in mind every time I bring up the word identity. It is important here. And then, around 18, I started experimenting. If you saw my last Music Mondays when I showed you guys a verse, my very first verse I've publicly shown anyone. The first line is, first time I got high was off an edible. That's true, okay? There's a big story there. I don't want to talk about it too much, but yes, I did eat a cookie edible to get high for the first time, and it was pretty funny. Yeah, I only ate half, and yeah, I went back to school that day just completely gone. So I would not suggest trying an edible for your first time. could be very intense. And when you eat edibles, you can't really control the dosage because you don't really know how much is in there. It's hard to tell. And back then, these were not like government created. So again, you just didn't really know. So yes, first time I got high was that way. I smoked a bong a few, I would say, months later. And then, I tried, blunts and rolls and spliffs and whatever. I tried all that eventually. So that was kind of how I got into the game, if you call it that. Now, yes, that was the days of experimenting. So, as I was doing more and more cannabis, I kind of just became a recreational user. And this definition to me means, I was doing it a few times a week, maybe 1 or 2 times, just whenever I had the opportunity to. Mainly that would be like when I hung out with friends, I would be smoking. Like I had my bong, so I kind of started doing it more and more. And I actually met a lot of friends and connected with a lot of people through cannabis, through smoking with people. So that's a good part of it. I'll get to the pros and cons, but I remember when I was a recreational user, I was meeting people who smoked, and it was kind of a big thing back then. It really seemed like that. At least where I was from, at least the people I was around, it wasn't really a stigmatized thing. Once you're in the community of people who smoke, it's not a big deal. It's like kind of like drinking in that sense. You either do or you don't. That's what it is. But anyways, I started to identify as a stoner, pothead, or whatever, because I had my bong. I was doing it every other day or so. So, this was 2012, 2013-ish. And also around that time, a lot of music was influencing me as well. A lot of TDE, a lot of Absol, a lot of Schoolboy Q, Mac Miller, Joey Badass, Chance the Rapper. A lot of these artists influenced me as well. So had a lot of influences going on around the time, and that kind of shifted my identity to, someone who partakes in smoking weed. You know what I mean? It was what it was. At a certain point, I ended up becoming a frequent user, and I would just call that like every day, basically. Every day, maybe once a day, something like that. So at this point of being a frequent user, I did start to feel a little shame for smoking so much, especially around my family. I didn't want people to know I was doing it. I would have like a bong and I'd smoke like in my room and blow it out the window, or have a spoof, as people would call it, which is just like a little handmade device where you can buy them and you blow into it and it kind of dissipates the smell, if that makes sense. So I would find ways to just do it in my room or just do it low key. I didn't want a lot of people knowing. Cannabis, it was illegal at the time, and I was still an athlete. I was still going to soccer, so it didn't seem like something I should be doing, and I started to kind of do it too much to a point where I felt bad. Like that shame started to come. I don't regret it now, looking back. Of course, I wouldn't regret much in my life at all, because I'm here where I am talking about it now. Coming full circle, it only seems right I talk about it. But yeah, I did have shame at the time. But regardless, I continued to smoke, whatever. I know, like I said, it was illegal, stigmatized. I even saw people, get suspended, get arrested for it. So it wasn't something I was proud to be doing so much at the time. That I know for sure. And then the height of my cannabis usage was the dependency. I was really, you could say physiologically or psychologically dependent on this substance. We all experience addictions differently, so I can only speak on myself, right? And yeah, it really was the height of my usage, where I was, using cannabis 3 to 4 times a day. I would wake up and I would need to. I would need to, in order to feel like myself, in order to be hungry and want food, in order to have energy. If I didn't, I would be burnt out and I would need to smoke again. Hence me, doing it 3-4 times a day by myself with friends. I would look for reasons and ways to. So yeah, I remember that period, which was, roughly 2013, 2014. I was doing it more than I definitely should have, but is what it is. I even bought this book here, Quit Cannabis. I don't know when I bought it, but I haven't read it. I just bought it because I'm like, you know what? I think I'm doing it too much. And so, if y'all want it, let me know. I'll sell it to you like $5 or more. If you want it, let me know. But yeah, I really just had no motivation to work out, really. I was still playing soccer, but I kind of eventually quit that just because I didn't want to play in the US, or I didn't want to keep pursuing it. So it just happened at the same time that I stopped playing soccer and I started smoking more. It kind of added to that shame and that like factor in my head. And really like the worst part was it was 2013, 2014. These are my first few years in university. And I was skipping school to stay in my room, not this room, but to stay in my room, smoke bowls, and just play video games every day. Not going to school, which I pay for. I pay for university, and I didn't want to go because I'd rather stay at home doing that. So my overall motivation, like clarity in life and focus, was just not in a good place. And that might have been because of other things in my life, sure, but the cannabis usage did not help that for me personally. So that was kind of like the lowest point of me doing it. The highest dependency was my like lowest point with, I don't know, cannabis usage, you could say. I think my intention of smoking was just to feel good, in the moment, maybe I was suppressing thoughts and emotions. Sure, that's fair to say, but I was just trying to enjoy life, feel good, escape. Have you ever heard of escapism? It's big. It's a big thing, especially nowadays in this pandemic. We all just want to escape life for a little bit, put on some Netflix, play some video games, anything to take us out of reality. That was huge for me growing up. And I think cannabis was just a way to experience escapism more so. But, I found ways to slow down. I kept going with my university degree, finished that. I actually finished way better than I started. So, congrats to me. I made it through that. So let's fast forward to like 2019, 2020. By this time, cannabis is legal. Okay, so boom. And actually, I'm going to give you some facts here. October 27th, 2018, cannabis became legal in Canada. Canada was the second country to fully legalize the possession, usage of cannabis. Second to which country? Uruguay. I looked this up, y'all. So a little facts, so sprinkle a little bit of knowledge on this episode. So there you go. Yes, it was legal by this time when I was a frequent or recreational user. After my high dependency, I still smoked like every day or every other day, a few times a week, whenever I kind of wanted to, by myself. I never got another bong, but I had a pipe, or I would just, use like pre-rolls. I never learned to roll. I was a bong guy all the way. So that's facts, and I'm happy to say that that's cool. So yeah, I used edibles a lot. Edibles were great for the pandemic because you didn't want to go out as much. You couldn't really smoke with friends as much. So having edibles is really, I don't know, it was kind of convenient. And a lot of people would probably agree with me. Plus, they became legal around this time, and you could purchase them through a lot of websites, through a lot of cannabis stores, government run. So that was kind of the way to go. So yeah, I mean, as we went into lockdown, I would still smoke every now and then. But I was busy. I was busy with Drive Test. I was busy with my podcast. So the intention of smoking, of using cannabis and stuff, was not escapism, was not just to feel good and suppress what I had going on in life. It was more just about relaxing at the end of the day. I would smoke after I'm done work. I wouldn't smoke then go to Drive Test or smoke and then come and record a podcast in front of you guys. No, I would do what I have to do because, I'm grown, I got stuff to do. And I would just use it as a way to relax, which I think a lot of people do nowadays. And then let's go to like nowadays. I would call myself a kind of a non-user of it completely, or most of the time really. A lot of the mentors that I look at online, they don't use cannabis at all. And they've explained why, and I kind of align with that way of thinking. I also learned a lot about sources of high versus low vibrations, and turns out cannabis, same with alcohol, even coffee, are low vibrational. So I'm pointing to a lot of reasons personally to just not do it anymore. I'm also, training to become an athlete again. So obviously, smoking is not going to be good for my lungs, respiratory, the system, cardiovascular health. It's not the best for that either. But I will say CBD products, okay, they actually are pretty good for athletes. They reduce physical inflammation in the body. And I think CBD products restore the balance of neurons, which I won't really get into because I'm not really sure about the science, but there are a lot of benefits for CBD products. So even though I'm against kind of using cannabis because I'm training to be an athlete, there are, usages of CBD. So let's be very particular about which parts of cannabis I find useful and which I don't find useful. But I think it's good to know that I can if I want to. I don't want to feel like if I do it, I'm going to just overindulge because I'm just like, no, 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 no. And then when you finally get it, you're like, oh, let me just do all of it. Let me just smoke it all. Like, no, I'm not trying to do that. So I trust myself to do it once in a while, but I really don't identify as a stoner anymore or someone who uses cannabis products for the most part. I just don't.